Life in the urban sprawl as a police officer doesn't just toughen you, it encases you in a shell of skepticism so impenetrable it might as well be Kevlar. That was me, Emma, a 37-year-old former lieutenant turned private detective, lugging around a suitcase of mistrust heavier than the cases I cracked. My daily grind revolved around unfaithful partners and the art of deception, not exactly the setting for a romantic fairy tale. Then Bobby walked into my life, a beacon of modern art in a world full of cynicism, refreshing my reality like a vibrant brushstroke on a fading mural. We met at an art exhibition in Philadelphia, a venue teeming with enthusiasts throwing around terms like postmodern and avant-garde with effortless poise. Feeling out of place, I wandered the gallery like a fish trying to pedal a bicycle. Intriguing piece, isn't it? Bobby's voice cut through my discomfort, his gaze fixed on what appeared to be a strategically arranged heap of junk. If by intriguing, you mean I've seen tidier trash heaps, then absolutely, it's fascinating, I quipped. His laugh was deep and warm, turning a few heads. He introduced himself, and from that moment, my life took on a new hue. Fast forward 7 months, and I was utterly smitten, caught up in a whirlwind romance that felt surreal. Bobby, with his dapper style and old-world charm, swept me off my feet with poetry readings, art shows, and the kind of attention that made me feel like the only woman alive. Under a starlit sky in Central Park, he proposed, and without hesitation, I said yes, my heart pounding with sheer joy. But every fairy tale has its shadows. Enter Marilyn, Bobby's mother, the epitome of frostiness. Our first dinner together was tense, with Marilyn scrutinizing me as if I were an unworthy intruder in her carefully curated world. A detective? Isn't that a bit unladylike? She asked, her tone sharp. Depends on the century your expectations are anchored in, I replied without missing a beat, earning a tense smile from Bobby. Marilyn's visits became frequent audits of my life. 3 weeks into our marriage, she appeared unannounced. Emma, darling, she began, her voice dripping with condescension, still clinging to that quaint little job of yours? I had hoped marriage would refine you. Slicing vegetables for dinner, I gripped the knife a little tighter. Marilyn, where I come from, we call this earning a living. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of leeching off others. I shot back, keeping my voice steady. Her lips pursed tightly. Bobby was raised with certain expectations. Emma, there's still time for you to find a more suitable career. Like being a full-time meddler? I retorted. Thanks, but I'll stick to tracking down cheaters and liars. Speaking of which, how's your bridge club treating you? Bobby walked in just then, his timing impeccable as always. What's going on? He asked, looking between us. Your wife was clarifying her career choices for me, Marilyn said, her tone overly sweet. Bobby sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mom, Emma's career is important to her. It's part of who she is. Turning to me, he pleaded, Emma, let's not do this now, please. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but I held back. Fine, I said curtly, returning to the vegetables. After Marilyn's visits, Bobby would retreat into a frustrating silence. It became painfully clear whose side he was on, and it wasn't mine. One evening, after Marilyn criticized everything from my cooking to my housekeeping, I confronted him. Why don't you ever stand up for me? Your mother treats me like I'm invisible, and you just let her. Is this what our marriage is supposed to be? He looked weary. Emma, she's old-fashioned. What do you want me to do? Cut her off? No, I replied, exasperated. I want you to support me, to tell her she can't bulldoze over us. Is that asking too much? I'll talk to her, okay? Just give it time. She'll adjust, he said, raking his fingers through his hair. But she didn't adjust, neither did he. The gap between us grew, fueled by Marilyn's coldness and Bobby's passivity, forming a rift too vast to bridge. Living with Bobby began to feel like starring in a melodrama where the cracks in the perfect facade only widened. His job at a prestigious art gallery sounded impressive, but his earnings were erratic at best. Meanwhile, I was left wondering if this was the love story I had signed up for, or a cautionary tale in disguise. I was doing well, securing a comfortable lifestyle for us in a stylish apartment in a desirable neighborhood. One evening, over dinner, I decided to bring up the future. I'd been thinking, I started, setting my fork down. Eventually, it'd be nice to buy a house, you know, something with enough space if we decide to start a family. Bobby paused, his fork midair, looking at me like I'd just suggested moving to Mars. Emma, Where are you getting these ideas? We don't need a house, and me finding a new job? That's not even on the radar. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone even. It's not about needing it, Bobby. It's about planning, stability, thinking ahead. He chuckled, the sound once warm but now grating on my nerves. You and your fixation on money, always crunching the numbers. Money isn't everything, Emma. That laugh, that dismissive laugh, pushed me to the edge. Easy for you to say when you're not the one stressed about paying the bills each month. I shot back, my voice tight. He shrugged, as though brushing away my words. I'm happy with our life as it is. You're the one who's never satisfied. The fork in my hand felt heavier than it should as I placed it on my plate. Maybe I wouldn't be so focused on money if you contributed more than critiques about how I manage it. He didn't even glance up, just kept eating. I contribute in other ways, Emma. Not everything is about money. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. It wasn't just about the house, or kids, or finances. It was about respect, partnership, and support, none of which Bobby seemed to value. As long as his life was comfortable, my concerns were dismissed as some misguided obsession with money. On a seemingly ordinary Sunday, the tension in our apartment reached a new peak when Marilyn, my ever-charming mother-in-law, made one of her unannounced visits. The living room became a stage for unexpected drama as I watched her pacing, phone pressed to her ear, her voice wavering between panic and disbelief. You're telling me my social security number has been suspended? She exclaimed, fumbling through her purse for her checkbook. How much do I need to pay to fix this? From the kitchen, coffee in hand, I overheard the words Social Security and payment, and every instinct honed from years of police work screamed scam. Setting the mug down, I walked briskly into the living room. Marilyn, hang up, it's a scam, I said firmly but calmly, trying to convey urgency without escalating her panic. She turned to me, eyes wide and face flushed. I beg your pardon? I'm handling this, Emma. There's no need for your intrusion. I could see she was shaken, but too proud to admit it. Before she could press further, I leaned in and said more firmly, Marilyn, trust me, I've dealt with hundreds of these cases. They're trying to steal from you. Her lips pursed tightly, but she hesitated, phone still in her hand. I reached out gently, hang up, and we'll call the real Social Security office together. You'll see. Reluctantly, she ended the call. The tension in the room hung thick as Bobby finally stepped in, his expression torn between annoyance and concern. Mom, you should have listened to Emma from the start, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. But instead of gratitude, Marilyn's glare shifted to me. It's always so convenient for her to play the hero, isn't it? And just like that, the gratitude I'd hoped for evaporated. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the retort on the tip of my tongue, knowing this was a fight that wouldn't be worth winning. I stepped forward, grabbed the phone, and ended the call with a sharp click. The room fell into tense silence. Marilyn recoiled, her face a storm of fury and disbelief. How dare you? She exclaimed, her voice trembling. That was incredibly rude and uncalled for. Who do you think you are, treating me like some naive child? Before I could respond, Bobby appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. Emma, what's going on? Why are you upsetting my mother? I turned to him, frustration bubbling over. That call was from scammers, Bobby. They were trying to con Marilyn out of her money, claiming her social security number was suspended. It's a common scam, I've seen it countless times. Bobby rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I knew well. It meant he felt caught in the middle. Okay, but couldn't you have handled it more diplomatically? Marilyn, her hands trembling as she gathered her belongings, shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. I don't need saving, especially not from someone who treats me so disrespectfully. I'll speak with the bank and see what they say about this so-called scam. She stormed out, leaving a frosty silence in her wake. Bobby sighed, his eyes shifting between the door and me. Emma, I know you meant well, but you have to handle things more gently, especially with my mother. I felt a pang of guilt but held my ground. Bobby, I know it seemed harsh, but scammers thrive on urgency. There wasn't time for polite exchanges. Any hesitation could have cost her thousands. The next day, still wrestling with a mix of guilt and curiosity, I called Marilyn. After 3 rings, she answered, her tone cold and measured. What do you want, Emma? I cleared my throat. I just wanted to check on you after yesterday. Did you speak with the bank about the call? There was a long pause before she replied, her voice reluctant. Yes, I did. They confirmed it was a scam. Relief washed over me, but her tone quickly hardened. That doesn't excuse how you handled things. You were rude and aggressive. Pinching the bridge of my nose, I felt a headache building. I'm sorry if I came across as harsh. I was trying to protect you. These scammers are professionals, they're convincing, and they rely on people hesitating. Her response was curt, though tinged with begrudging acknowledgement. Well, I suppose I should thank you for stopping me from making a mistake, but don't think this changes my opinion of your methods, or your demeanor. Goodbye, Emma. I saw Bobby's upcoming birthday as a chance to bridge the growing chasm between us, a hopeful opportunity to rekindle the fading spark in our relationship. Carefully, I planned a romantic weekend getaway, envisioning it as a step toward restoring what we once had. But fate, or Marilyn, had other plans. She bulldozed my efforts with her own agenda, scheduling a grand dinner at her mansion on a weekday, fully aware of my packed work schedule. Over the phone, I pleaded, "Can't we move it to Saturday? I'm drowning at work." Her voice was a blend of saccharine sweetness and icy control. "No, dear, this is when it's happening. Bobby shouldn't have to adjust his birthday to fit around your job." Frustration gnawed at me, and I found myself confiding in my boss, the only person who seemed to understand. He'd witnessed more betrayals than most and recognized the importance of the moment. "Go," he urged with a knowing look. "Do what you need to do." When I arrived at Marilyn's, the party was already in full swing, a spectacle of ostentation and pretense. Marilyn spotted me immediately, her smile tightening as she whispered something to Bobby. My eyes followed her line of sight, and there he was, my husband, sitting by the fireplace, his arm draped casually around a woman who was far more than just a colleague. My heart sank, but I steeled myself and approached. "Aren't you going to introduce me?" I asked, trying to sound composed despite the whirlwind of emotions inside. Bobby flinched, his eyes widening in surprise. "Ah, Emma, this is Lori from the gallery," he mumbled, turning awkwardly to the woman. "And this is, Emma, a relative." The word struck like a slap. A relative? Seriously, Bobby? I couldn't contain my incredulity. "Your wife, Bobby, remember?" My voice carried across the room, silencing the hum of conversations. All eyes turned to us. Bobby's face turned red with a mix of embarrassment and irritation. "You know, a real wife would have made her husband's birthday a priority," he shot back, dismissing me with a turn of his shoulder. Before I could respond, Marilyn appeared, her voice oozing disdain. "You see, Emma, you just don't fit in here. Bobby needs someone supportive, like Lori, not, whatever this is." Her words, sharp and deliberate, cut deep. She gestured toward the door with a venomous smile. "I think it's best if you leave. You're not wanted here." I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of dignity I had left. "You know what, Marilyn? Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong in a family that thrives on lies and deception." Without another word, I turned and walked out into the cold night, the chill wrapping around me like the icy aftermath of betrayal. After the disaster at Bobby's birthday and the stark revelations that followed, I knew I needed irrefutable proof to end the marriage on my terms. The thought of investigating Bobby myself felt unbearable. I could handle uncovering secrets about strangers, but not about the man I had once envisioned growing old with. So, I called Alan, a trusted colleague with a knack for uncovering discreet affairs. "Hey, Alan, I need a favor," I said, steadying my voice over the phone. "Anything for you. What's up?" he responded, his loyalty a small comfort in the storm of betrayal. "It's Bobby," I admitted, the words tasting bitter. "I'm sure he's seeing someone. I need evidence." I admitted the truth, my words carrying a mix of relief and dread. "Say no more," Alan said confidently. "I'll handle it discreetly. You'll have everything you need soon." His assurance eased some of my anxiety. True to his word, Alan delivered everything: photos, audio clips, and undeniable proof. Lori wasn't just a colleague. She was in the country illegally, seeking a quick marriage to fix her immigration status while involved in fraud. Part of me wanted to confront Bobby, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him squirm, but then I remembered his condescension, his smug expression, and his blatant dismissal of me. No, he didn't deserve my concern, or my help. Filing for divorce was like tearing off a band-aid from a wound that had been festering for far too long. I demanded financial compensation, the bare minimum after his betrayal. The fallout was explosive. Marilyn, ever the dragon lady, stood firmly by Bobby's side, painting me as the villain, but I stood my ground, fueled by both the evidence and the injustice of their accusations. When the ink on the divorce papers dried, It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, a rebirth from the ashes of my life with Bobby. Opening my detective agency wasn't just a dream fulfilled, it was a testament to my resilience. The agency quickly built a reputation for discretion and effectiveness, a reflection of the lessons I had learned through my own struggles. One morning, sunlight streamed into my new office, illuminating the framed license on the wall. Alice, my right-hand woman and confidant, peeked in. "Boss lady, you've got a minute? We've got a potentially big case. A woman suspects her husband of having an affair. She wants surveillance, photos, the works." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. "Sounds like our bread and butter. Do we have the details?" Alice nodded, placing a file on my desk. "Yeah, but there's a catch. She's on a tight budget." I thought for a moment, realizing this was my chance to pay it forward. "Tell her we'll work with her budget. And Alice, let's make sure we're thorough. I know all too well what it's like to be on the other side of this conversation." Alice grinned. "Knew you'd say that. You're a good person, you know." I smirked. "Try telling that to my ex." As the days passed and the cases piled up, each one felt like a step toward healing. Infidelity, secrets, and lies, these were the patterns I had grown familiar with. Yet, with each closed case, I felt another piece of myself mend, validation that I had made the right choice to start over. Then one morning, as the city stirred awake, an elderly woman burst into the office, her distress palpable. She argued with my receptionist about her son's wife, who had vanished with a large sum of money, leaving the family in financial ruins. She insisted on speaking to the agency owner and mentioned needing a payment plan. Curiosity piqued, I decided to meet her myself. To my astonishment, I found myself face to face with Marilyn, my former mother-in-law. Recognition flickered across her face before embarrassment set in. "Emma, you run this agency?" "I do," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the swirl of emotions. "How can I help?" Desperation overtook her shame. "You have to help me find her. The woman who ran off with my son's money. Bobby's in shambles. Do it for the family's sake, without charge." Her audacity rendered me momentarily speechless. "Marilyn, first, we're not family. Second, I run a business, not a charity for ex-in-laws." "Emma, after everything, can't you do this one thing? It's the least you could do," she pressed. I laughed bitterly. "The least I could do? Marilyn, after your son cheated on me, you expect me to just forgive and forget? Go to the police. They're better equipped for this." She stood there, flabbergasted, as if the thought of me refusing her had never crossed her mind. "Marilyn, I've learned my lesson. Never trust scammers and liars. Maybe it's time you did too." The decision was final. Life, it seemed, had come full circle, but I had no intention of being dragged back into their chaos. A week later, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number I thought I had erased. "Bobby." Against my better judgment, I answered. "Bobby, what do you want?" "Emma," he began, his tone tentative. "I've been thinking. I want us to start over. For the kids, you know." I couldn't help but snort. "Really? And where would we live in this fantasy of yours?" "With my mom, at first," he said eagerly. "We can save money, then you can buy us a house. It'll be perfect." I laughed, the absurdity of his proposal striking me fully. "You think I'd come back to play house with you and your mom, and then foot the bill for a big house?" "Emma, I've changed. Please," he pleaded. "Bobby," I said firmly, "you haven't changed a bit. Goodbye." As I hung up, a profound sense of peace washed over me. The call, absurd as it was, served as validation. I had grown, I had healed, and I had reclaimed my life. The future lay ahead, bright and brimming with promise. Turning back to my work, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. After all, the best revenge is living well, and I was doing just that.